I'm writing a book on Indian democracy, and it's clear that there's a division between, well, it goes all the way back to the independence period, a division between two groups that, and I know these will sound like the names have some kind of implication, but these are just technical names that sociologists have given them. There's a big difference between the comprador elite. Now, comprador does not mean selling out. Comprador just means that you're someone who's involved in trade or involved in intermediating relations with the outside world. So the term comprador arose originally in Portuguese to describe those local people whom the Portuguese could deal with in order to make to trade with the local society in the places where they went in South and Southeast Asia. But the term comprador elite has come to mean that class of people who were the intermediaries between colonial powers and local people. So people like, I mean, the classic comprador elite is Mahatma Gandhi. So I want to make it clear, comprador is not an insult. Comprador is simply a description that Mahatma Gandhi was able, on the one hand, to talk to a viceroy, but on the other hand, to talk to ordinary people. He was an interlocutor between these two groups. Okay, Mahatma Gandhi with his London barrister background, Nehru with his London barrister background, Jinnah with his Muslim barrister background, to some extent Savarkar, not quite the same. He was much more of an outsider in London because he was a revolutionary, but he was still someone who could equally well speak in front of a British court and speak to ordinary people. Okay, so they're members of this comprador elite. There's a big distinction, but he's an outsider in that elite, yes, in a way that the others were not. He went to, the others were put in gentlemen's prisons. Savarkar was sent to the Andamans to hard labor, right? So I want to be clear that he's part of that elite, but he had a very different trajectory from the others. But we can contrast that with what we call the national elite. And again, I say this about terms because Indians will immediately say, "Oh, national is fantastic. Comprador is terrible." There's no implication like that. These are just technical words. Okay, so the national elite in sociological usage are people who primarily conducted their business within the country. They may have spoken English or in some other colony, the European language. They may have spoken English, but they weren't primarily articulating between colonizer and colonized. They were making their money or making their profession in the national milieu. So if we think of the classic example of this is the RSS. Okay, Dr. Hedgewar and the RSS emerged entirely out of a gentlemanly circle. They weren't poverty-stricken men of the soil, but they were educated men. But Dr. Hedgewar and Professor Golwalkar, they're educated men, but they were not London-educated barristers. They were locally educated members, and most of their supporters were members of the local economic elite. So the RSS emerged out of merchant and landowner circles in Maharashtra and Gujarat. Right?
One can also argue.
Well, but in the whole, Gujarat was quickly spreading. Okay, so they're part of a different milieu from the comprador elite. And this division, and not just the RSS. There are other if you think of the Brahmo Samaj,
Arya Samaj, all of
Arya
these.
Samaj, all of these kind of organizations that were local organizations of local
I'm not so sure
people, the
about
Vivekananda mission,
Jammu and Kashmir because
all of these are members of the national elite. Now they are elite. I'm not saying they're rich. They're elite in the sense of they're not farmers or weavers who were scratching out a living on the land, right? So they were members of professional class. So revolutions in general and independence movements in general are driven forward by professionals. That's why there's this long connection between the quote unquote rise of the middle class and political awareness. But there are these two competing groups of professionals who were involved in the development of India, and not just in India. This same division, again, as a comparativist, what I'm bringing to the table is not I like these people, I don't like these people. What I'm bringing to the table is, this division between a comprador elite and a national elite, this appeared all over the world, in all sorts of post-colonial or in all sorts of colonial and then later post-colonial societies. Now, that fundamental division has transferred today in what you might call the division between old India and new India. I mean, I heard Karan Thapar once in one of his interviews frankly admitting, he was talking to his guest, I don't remember who the guest was. He said, we're members of this old India, the English-speaking, British-educated, internationalist in outlook. And he recognized very clearly, and that's why I like Thapar, because whatever his politics, I know individual people may like or dislike his politics, he's very self-aware. He knows that he's on that side of politics, as opposed to being sanctimonious about it and thinking everybody must agree with him. Okay, so he's very aware that he's a member of this. He may not use the term comprador elite, but he would use the term old India, or as I jokingly put it in on Twitter, con market gang. As a comparativist, it's very clear to me that this division exists, and I don't put any particular value on what, just because someone like Shashi Tharoor is more likely to be my friend and I'm more likely to run into him at an international event. I've never met him, by the way. Shashi, if you're listening, call me. I'd love to get together. I love your books. But just because I'm a member of this class doesn't mean that I don't respect that other class. And there's this very clear division in Indian politics, not just in politics, in Indian society, between an old India that is loath to give up its privileges and a new India that is insisting that in a democracy, nobody gets that kind of privilege. Everybody has the same vote. And that process, and I mean, you can think of it as a process of modernization if you want, but that process is really a process of democratization. And it's good for the country. And I'm very bullish on India. Having hostility is the wrong word. Having divisions is not a sign of immaturity. It's a sign of maturity.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.